name is Kira, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm a member of the British Museum Youth Collective.
And my name is Olivia, my pronouns are also she, her, and I'm also a member of the British Museum Youth Collective. Today we're joined by Matthew Bascott from Mind for a discussion about mental health and well-being and the part that museums can play into this.
I am the lead of the Healthy Minds community programme. We're a mental health community programme that gives members access to a 12-month programme of free activities, free events, and we partner with the British Museum to deliver that.
Cool, thank you for that, Matt. To start off, could you tell us what events that the British Museum and Mind have done in the past that have been associated with mental health and wellness?
Sure, yeah, so our main collaboration is the walk and talk tours. So these tours are designed specifically around people with mental health issues to give them a kind of guided tour and a slightly different access to what normally would happen in the museum. So our members would either come and meet us at Mind in Camden and we can chaperone them to the museum, or if people are more independent, they can kind of meet us at the museum. And then the staff at the museum, so a volunteer who's had some mental health training, will guide them around a current exhibition at a kind of slower pace, or just get them to kind of take in a little bit more of what's on offer. And then these usually end in what our members really love, which is a kind of private space where there is a social element. There's often a tactile element where museum staff will get out artifacts or things that they can touch and feel and talk about, and then refreshments are served as well. So that's the kind of the main thing. The British Museum also offer us a community access, so they'll give us free tickets for our members who this wouldn't be guided, but it's a kind of, it's for the community, so it's slightly quieter. And people can kind of go at their own pace to those things, or those exhibitions.
So now looking at more recent events, so what has the impact of COVID-19 been on mental health, particularly considering the recent impact on students at universities facing lockdown, and just the general disruption to schools across the country right now for young people?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a difficult question to answer just because, obviously everyone's experience of this whole pandemic, while being shared, it's very different for different members. I can speak kind of anecdotally and I can speak about my own experience, but certainly I think it's interesting because this time feels like it's the most difficult. I think when we went into lockdown, obviously there was a lot of distress, and obviously depending on what people had access to, there was generally, there was a sense of kind of we knew what we were doing. We were locking down, we were getting, being safe and protecting each other. But I think as we've come out of lockdown, what I've really noticed is, us as human beings aren't always that great at dealing with uncertainty. And I think at the moment, the kind of increased levels of uncertainty from everywhere, across the whole board, really, that's really having a massive impact on people's mental health. I think the difficulty is that, I think we tend to try and cling to ideas or things that make sense to us. But obviously we all cling to different ideas. And I think with lockdown, and particularly for students, I think because everyone's in a different place. So we're not all in this together at the moment. Some people are being locked down, some people aren't. And I think that just creates a kind of even bigger level of uncertainty. I think, I was trying to reflect on this and thinking about, my experience of when I went to university and I wasn't going during a lockdown, and I just felt so isolated. And I think that's a real problem, and something that's not really being addressed right now, is that sense of isolation and forced isolation in some respects. So the disruption, the uncertainty, and also, I suppose, when we went into lockdown earlier, it was kind of summer, at least we could go out and exercise and going places even once a day is vital. But now we're coming to winter, and winter is already, is always a time where most of us feel a bit lower in our moods anyway. And I think without clarity on a way to move forward, that can be quite intolerable for a lot of people, myself included.
Yeah, it's definitely a worry because I sympathise with all students and university students especially, and those first years who have just started their university journey, and then they're then put into a flat maybe of people they don't know, they've never met them, and then they're forced to quarantine or just stay within those rooms. It must be really tricky.
And again, yeah, with a bunch of people you have no idea and probably wouldn't necessarily hang out without that context. And I remember crying and just being like, oh, I don't know if I can handle this. And I just think, yeah, then to be kind of forced into that position and not allowed out, I don't know. I don't think I would personally be able to handle it. I have massive respect for everyone who is going through that experience now.
Following that is the museum's position in mental health and wellbeing. That can be for staff, volunteers, visitors.
I think following on from that kind of mass uncertainty, what I feel that museums kind of give us is a sense of our own narrative and our own history. So going into a space where we can see how things have been, how people have lived in various different times, learning about different cultures, I think that's a really enlightening experience and gives us a sense of our shared kind of humanity. Um, I was thinking that, sometimes there is this, when we're in where we are, it's very hard to look at beyond current circumstances. And I think, we can get quite overwhelmed. But something quite magical, I think, about going to a museum is like you can see, in some sense, it's this like, it sort of connects us with what's already been, and we know we are part of something bigger. So what is happening to us right now is awful, but there is a sense of perspective that the museum can give us, in that this is part of a bigger history.
I think as well, like looking at other museums that are starting to make collections about COVID relevant material, it's like this is also going to be in the future something that museums might be remembering or kind of bringing stuff together for.
Yeah, massively, and I think that's a really important point. And I just think that going to a museum anyway is so stimulating, and gives us access to, obviously we're talking about the British Museum, but other museums where if it's art, if it's history, whatever it is, it gives us a sense of objects and being connected to things. And this will be in a museum one day, as you say. So I think that's a really important point to kind of keep in mind.
So looking forward, what can museums do in the future to be more inclusive to those with mental health?
I think there are obviously practical solutions, and I think the British Museum have been very good at that. So there are the practical solutions, and there's also obviously staff training, which volunteers at the museum currently are being trained in. But I think the most important thing, and this goes across all organisations, but it's just being able to listen and actually talk to the people that you're trying to build a community with. And I think from our perspective at Mind, I think what the British Museum have been really good at is they come to our coffee mornings. So as an organisation, we have a monthly coffee morning, where members can kind of just drop in and have a sort of social space to chat. And we always have well, not always, but every so often have a representative from the museum that comes, and just gets to know members. Because I think more than anything, I think sometimes, and I know from my own personal experience, when we go into museums or big public spaces, it can be quite overwhelming. There's lots of people that seem to know what they're doing and they're all rushing around doing something, and it can be like, oh, I don't know how I fit here. But having a connection, or knowing the staff, knowing the security guard, knowing that you can have that kind of communication with people, is really, really vital, and it kind of gives a sense of ownership over a space. And I do think that talking is like the most important thing. And, you know, we live in a very busy world where everything's rushed and we normally hand out surveys, but I think actually inviting people into the space, being able to discuss how it impacts them, how people want this space to be for them, I think that's where all museums and all organizations really can really kind of step up and be more involved in that.
Definitely. I think building that relationship and having those conversations really makes museums and galleries accessible to everyone. And it's exciting to think what events and things that can come out in the future. Yeah, so thank you so much, Matt, for joining us today. It was really insightful and interesting to hear your answers to the topics that we're discussing.
And thank you everyone for watching. We now invite you to join us in a guided relaxation and meditation session with Michael James Wong from Just Breathe Project. So meditation is generally considered a safe activity, especially at the beginning levels. And at these levels, it's mainly practiced in deep stillness, breathing and presence. So we ask that you're cautious and do not exert yourself beyond what's comfortable.
Hey guys, and welcome to this session about meditation. My name is Michael James Wong, and I'm a meditation teacher and founder of an organization called Just Breathe, which is a business focused on bringing mindfulness and meditation to the masses in a very real world way. Now, throughout my time as a teacher, I've had lots of opportunities to sit in spaces like this, whether it's online or offline in real life, but to talk about the benefits of meditation and how it can be so valuable to our everyday lives in the real world and how we live without changing much. Now, the best way to start is for me to understand and to maybe set the scene on what meditation actually is. Now, for a lot of you, you might think meditation, sit down, close your eyes, just breathe, and wait until time's over. And to be fair, you wouldn't be wrong. But however, it's not the only way that we can understand this practice. Now, meditation as a whole, it's really nice to recognize the benefits of the practice. A lot of times knowing why we meditate can actually add to the value of what it does for us. So why do we meditate? So in the world that we live in today, it is arguably a busy, busy place. Right? It's chaotic, it's uncertain, and even now more than ever in these times of lockdowns, pandemics, and just uncertainty, there are lots of things that we aren't able to control and lots of things that elevate our stress, tension, anxiousness, and make us feel a bit disconnected. The power of meditation is the opportunity to recognize how we can refuel, recharge, and reconnect to ourselves. How we can calm the mind, ease the body, and create a sensation within ourselves that allows us to feel this sense of well-being. Because without that feeling, then we miss out on a moment to really experience life as it unfolds pleasantly and joyfully. And so what actually is meditation, right? What actually is the practice of meditation? And again, you would be right if it was sit down, close your eyes, and just breathe. And that will be a practice that we will look at today. But if I were to widen the scope of meditation to help understand actually in its fullest capacity what meditation actually is, it is the realization that meditation is anything that expands our awareness and gives us the opportunity to be presently aware of this very moment at ease. So one best way to talk about meditation is to recognize and to realize that the practice of meditation is almost kind of like, it's almost the practice of realizing that there are many styles and types, right? There's no such thing as just one type of meditation. There's not just one way to sit in a practice. That meditation itself is almost kind of like the vegetable aisle at the supermarket, right? We know that that section is good for us, but within it, there's so many choices and options and flavors that suit us, but also ones that aren't for us. So as a first way to start in this practice is to recognize that there are different styles of practice. And today I'm going to talk about 3 different ones. by recognizing that there are three different styles of practice in meditation is to recognize that we are individual in our practices and we can recognize the ones that suit us well. So today I'm going to talk to you about those three practices, but before I do, I'm also going to talk to you about, when we should practice and how we should practice. But what I will say throughout this, and at the end of this session, we will do a little meditation practice together. What I will encourage you is to realize and recognize that there is no such thing as winning in meditation. Right? The aim and the goal of a practice is not to do it well. It's not to win meditation. It is simply to have the time set aside to experience the practice. Right? And in a lot of ways, it's almost counterintuitive, counterproductive to what it means to be a human being in society. A lot of us are raised in a system where you do this and you get it right and you've done it well. Right? Meditation doesn't work this way. Meditation is the practice of the experience. And so what we'll talk about today is how we can cultivate different techniques that can help us stay within the experience of meditation. Not achieve it, not win it, not succeed at it, but to simply dial it back to a state of less doing and non-doing. So today we're going to talk about those three styles or three types of practice. And again, there are more than a few, but these three types are the way that I like to look at it to help us easily understand the practice when we first begin. The first one that we're going to talk about today is a style of practice that we call focused intention. Focused intention. And what that means is we are looking at the way in which we focus our attention on something that holds an intention. Now, you might have practiced a style like this before, because this is the style that we find is most commonly with guided meditations. And this might be, for example, where you are practicing a meditation in a group or with friends or on an app or through a recording. And there is a guide that is allowing you to focus your attention on something that is intentional. So this might be very simply, if you've ever experienced the practice where you might close your eyes. And the guide might simply say, bring your attention to the color red. What does it feel like? What do you see? What do you notice? And as the mind settles within this deep, rich color of red, what does it make you think of? What is it that it inspires within you? Perhaps it is love, warmth. Perhaps it is kindness. And in this moment, as the color red starts to embody more of a sense or sensation or a feeling, love. Allow it to be held within you and allow it to captivate your attention through this moment of intentionality. And so in this style of practice, and again, you might have enjoyed that with us here, or just kind of taking a moment to take it in, we allow ourselves to focus intently on something that captivates our attention fully. And so this type of style, you can find that you will have guided meditations, affirmations of words, visualizations, and these different practices within this idea of focused intention allows us to connect to something external. When I say external, I mean the idea of something. a concept of something, a color of something, a touch, a taste, a focus. And this in many ways is why we realize as well that the practice of meditation isn't always just your eyes closed. I would happily guide you through a meditation like this and just allow you to stare just off into the garden, onto a little spot on the wall, off into the sunset. All we're simply doing is cultivating our attention on something that we can focus on very intently for a moment of time. And for a lot of people, this style of practice is preferred, because in many ways, it is something to do with the mind, so we can cultivate this quiet within. This is the most common style you'll find on meditation apps, on audio guided meditations, and a lot of times when you're in spaces where you're practicing for the first time. One of the best examples of focused intention practice of meditation is music. Putting on some music, allowing it to take you on a journey, allowing it to transport you away from the noise and the busyness of the world around you, and just turn it inward. Allow you stillness to just be. Focused intention. All right. The second style of practice that I'm going to talk to you today about is what we call present moment awareness. Present moment awareness. And this very much is a practice of inwardness, a practice of recognizing what's within us, a practice of paying attention to the subtleties and the details within our breath and within our body. And so within this style of practice, you could very simply just allow yourself to be presently aware of the breath moving in and out, in and out. And allowing it to be so captivating that the mind doesn't wander into newness, doesn't wander into thought, it doesn't wander away. We just bring ourselves into this place of breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. At the same time, this type of practice is a practice that we could recognize as something that allows us to notice the physical shape, seat, or state that we're in. Let's try this just for a minute or two. Go ahead and join me as you close your eyes. And just make sure that you've got both feet on the floor. And just give yourself a little bit of structure in the seat, but not too much, that you're upright. And all that I'm going to simply ask you to do is in this practice is notice how your 2 feet connect to the floor. Do not change the pressure of the feet into the earth. Just simply recognize the connection between you and the floor beneath you. And just feel as if the feet are so steady that it allows your attention to rise from the feet up through the shins towards the knees, up past the knees, towards the hips, to the very seat that you're sitting in. The seat of the spine, the seat connected to the chair that you're in. Feel the support that carries you. Feel the comfort that holds you. And from this seat, Can you allow your mind to travel the spine upward, as if rising with inspiration? The lightness climbing each vertebrae as it moves up towards the very, very top of the spine, at the base of the neck, through the throat. As if it is very gently elevating the back of the head, the crown of the head, the very top of the head, so that you feel this lightness lifting you just a fraction tall. The groundingness of the feet that connects you to the earth, to the seat that supports you as the spine rises to lightness. This is the practice of present moment, where we cultivate the awareness to recognize what is. And very simply, when you're ready, just come on back and open your eyes. And so this is the practice of the second type of meditation, present moment awareness. And hopefully through that time, you would have noticed, even in the space of a minute or two, the connection to the floor, the seat that supports you, the rising of the spine, the lightness of the crown, and just that feeling of being completely aware of yourself as the moment unfolds. I can only hope that you felt something, experienced something, and there was something in that style of practice that maybe made you feel a sense of ease. And so this then brings us on to our third style of practice, a style of practice that we call the practice of being, the practice of absolute stillness, a practice that transcends us to a place away from the thinking mind. And so in this style of practice, this third style of practice, it is not about focusing your attention outward. It's not about being presently aware of the physical shape of your body. It is simply cultivating the conditions in which we can allow the mind to be perfectly settled so that we embody the state of being instead of doing. And the best way to practice this technique is to utilize what we call a mantra, or a mantra affirmation, which is a small set of words that allow us to use them within the capture of our mind to soften away from any new thought or attraction. And so very simply, to practice this technique, we look at this in a way of using a very small mantra. And in this case, we're going to use the words just breathe. Just breathe. And the reason we're going to use just breathe is because it is so simple, self-defining. We understand what it means. And in effect, it reminds us very simply of the actions that are needed. Just breathe. And so what I'd like you to do is to use this mantra and just allow it to pulse very gently in the mind. Not just yet, but when we get the chance to practice. And it pulses very gently in the mind. Just breathe. Just breathe. And what we will notice is, as we do this practice, and as we sit with the eyes closed and we're settled into this space, the mind will slowly just allow it to soften. And the words just breathe that we use in our mind as the mantra starts to soften, maybe into something less rigid. Just breathe, the edges will soften and maybe just become sounds, syllables. And almost in such, it's like the softening just settles us into a quieter state. Does that make sense? And so what you will find in this practice, when we look at a practice of just breathing, a being technique of stillness, is that this technique itself is very, very simple. Close your eyes, sit still, let the mind speak, just breathe to ourselves through the time. This is the technique and one that we can cultivate very easily and effortlessly. However, the challenge is not the technique, but rather the commitment to it. The commitment to staying with it, because the mind is so curious. And so I promise what will happen is throughout the time, at some point, the mind will wander. We'll be sitting, just breathe, just breathe, just breathe. And the mind will go, what's for lunch? Or it'll go, do my phone ring? I need to buy some new shoes. I need to call my mother back. The mind is this curious and fascinating way of trying to attract your attention all the time. This is the joy of being human. We allow our curiosity to attract us into all these new thoughts, ideas, conversations. And so the commitment to this practice is actually the complete adverse to that. How can we stay dedicated to just breathe, dedicated to the mantra, dedicated to doing no more than what we set out on our task to do? And so, very simply, what I will ask and offer you is that in these moments, as we sit quietly in the mind, just breathe. In these moments where we become attracted by something else, and we become attracted by a thought, just simply acknowledge it, but then let it go. The moment we acknowledge our thoughts and then indulge in them is the moment we move away from the practice and the moment we become distracted. And you will see that's easier said than done. And so my offer to you today is to simply commit to the practice of just breathe in and let that be the guide for the ride. We'll take a moment to practice together as a way to wind up this little session together. But before we do that, let me tell you a few more things that are nice to know as you get going on your practice. What's the best way to sit? Or what's the best way to practice? It's very easy to be tempted into thinking I need to sit on the floor cross-legged like they have in those photos and make a big mess of the situation. My offer for you is very simply this: sit in a way that is comfortable for you. Sit in a way where the physical shape does not distract you. So you could be like me, I'm sitting on a chair today. You could sit on the edge of the sofa, on the edge of the bed. You could sit on the floor if that's comfortable for you. But if it's not, don't force it. The other thing I will say is that oftentimes the body, just like the mind, will distract you or tempt you. And so as we start a practice like this, the mind will say, okay, my knee's really itchy. My ear's on fire. And the mind will sit there punishing itself as it tries to ignore. And so what I'd love to tell you and to gift you is that in these moments that the physical body starts to take your attention, just deal with it. And so if it simply means you think your ear's on fire, just check. It's not, but the mind will tell you it is. The moment you check that your ear's not on fire, the moment it goes away. This is the joy of the practice. And so simply, if you need to scratch, scratch. However, don't use it as a way to tempt yourself, but just simply, if there's something that takes your attention, deal with it. And then the space is clear and the path is clear for you to find your way back into stillness. Okay, so find a comfortable seat. If there's an itch it. If there's a scratch that needs to be scratched, deal with it. I always think it's quite nice. You can always sit with your back against something like a wall or shelf like I am. You can sit with your back against the chair or the sofa. Having that little bit of connection and support is also quite nice. So you can always try that. The last thing I will say is try to keep yourself relatively symmetrical though, as in both feet on the floor or both feet crossed up. Just try not to kind of cross your legs over too much, because if you end up doing that, it just can be a bit distracting for yourself. And oftentimes, if you cross it one way, then you'll inevitably want to cross it the other. And so my invitation to you is this. Go ahead and find yourself into a comfortable seat. Find yourself in the time and the practice to settle in. And as you're ready, and there is no rush, there's never any rush with meditation. As you're ready, close your eyes. I very much like to start up any practice with a simple inhale and exhale. So breathe in, breathe out. And just kind of the same way as you would let a cup of tea settle on the tabletop, just allow yourself the gift to gently arrive into stillness. We are not a light switch that needs to be flicked on and off. We are simply a human being that just requires a moment to settle in. And so now, as we find ourselves in this place of quietness, remembering and acknowledging that there's no such thing as a good or a bad meditation. There is just simply the time, the experience that we have to just breathe. And so this is the practice. To be still. To cultivate this space of being. To embody this space of gentleness. And so very effortlessly, just allow the mind to settle on the mantra. Just breathe. Just allow it to sit very effortlessly in the space of the mind as it softens away from the thoughts. Just breathe. And just let this simple affirmation be the guide for the ride ahead. Softly, easily, quietly. Allow the mind to just breathe. And of course, if there are moments where the mind wanders, know that that is okay. We just simply acknowledge and come back. Just breathe. This is the goal and the gift of this practice, to be non-striving, non-achieving, non-needing. This is the space to just be. This is a practice of effortlessness, practice of ease. Just breathe. And so very carefully and calmly and quietly, just allow yourself the space to come back into the seat of this room. Can be simple within, maybe just allow the chin to tuck. And maybe just allowing your eyes just to open back in your own lap. And the offer, as always, is just to notice how you feel. Dare I say, a sense of calmness maybe within you. Restedness, easefulness. This is the practice of meditation, and this is the value that we find within it because it invites this sense of knowingness, sense of easefulness. When we step into a space that is just a bit quieter. So guys, that is the end of this session. And it's been such a joy and a pleasure to be able to sit with you today to talk about meditation and to practice it. It is something for me that is so powerful in my life and something that I truly believe is valuable in everyone's, especially in the world we live in today. Now, what I will say, as always, because I know this is amongst a whole program of many different other things to try and to experience, that just like the day that you're having, let meditation be something that is unique every single day. Never take it for granted, but never take it with expectation. Today is simply today, and you can always find a little space to just breathe. Thank you guys so much for sitting in and joining in. Once again, my name is Michael James Wong. I am a meditation teacher and founder of Just Breathe. And you can find out more about Just Breathe. So on the website, there is lots of different articles, lots of different conversations that can really help you understand more about this practice, and lots of different conversations that are really important in this world of wellness. And the website is www.justbreatheproject.com. As well, you can follow on social at Just Breathe on all socials to find out and stay connected to our community. And one thing that's really helpful, especially if you enjoyed this last practice, is to download the Just Breathe app. You can find that on Apple and Android alike, and it is a daily practice that is very simple, that has both music, meditation guides, and a simple timer to keep you on track. As well, if you want to find out more and follow along with me, my name is Michael James Wong. You can follow me at Michael James Wong on all social activity out there, as well as I'm the host of a podcast called The Quiet Life, which talks about these practices and more in our everyday lives. Thanks again so much for having me. Thanks again so much for sitting in on this session, and I appreciate you and hope that you have found something relevant and valuable from this session about meditation. Again, be well, stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.